what you're essentially doing when you're sending out an email or you're putting a blog up or you're putting a post up on social media is you're saying, hey, pay attention to me. And I think it is really quite important to think about how often you ask for your audience's attention and how, I guess, what you're giving them in that post or in that email newsletter.
Hi, I'm Beth Beesky, the founder of More Time to Design and your host of the Design Dialogues podcast. I've been a designer for the last 12 years and I've run my own studio for 5, and I know how hard it is to run a successful business. You not only need to be great at designing, but you need to be great at all the other things as well. I created More Time to Design, a software platform to help designers run efficient studios, and I've created the Design Dialogue podcast to help us all learn together. Each week, we will meet professionals who are at the top of their game doing things that help us run our studios. We'll have conversations with social media managers, interior design mentors, copywriters, stylists, photographers, suppliers, and also designers who have been in the game for a long time and who have such a wealth of knowledge to share. I hope that each week you feel inspired and informed at the end of each of our design dialogues. So join me for the Design Dialogue podcast. Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's Design Dialogues. So we are back with Penny from TwoPence Digital Marketing and learning all about social media, digital marketing, content, all of that kind of stuff.
Hello.
How are you today, Penny?
Yeah, I'm really well. How are you?
Good. So I love to learn what can everyone see out their window while they're talking to me. So what can you see out your window today?
So I am really lucky to live in a sort of outer north suburb in Naarm, colonially known as Melbourne. And so I'm just surrounded by trees and wildlife, and there's currently a little noisy miner sitting on our fence and making noise, which is quite apt. So that's what I'm looking at outside my window right now.
I love it. Well, your noisy miners can go with the kookaburras that I've got sitting outside my window. So we might have some nice bird song for everyone as the background for today's episode.
Beautiful.
For everyone who didn't listen to Penny's first episode, we will put links into the show notes for them. But I really encourage you to go back and listen to that first episode where we talk a little bit, I suppose, high kind of ideas around social and digital media marketing and why you need a strategy for it. You can't just kind of, do things randomly. But today I thought we would talk a little bit more about kind of, okay, we've set our strategy. We've kind of spent our time doing that. What's next? What do we do now? And I know that the word consistency is going to come up in our conversation. And I think it is the bane of everyone's life when it comes to especially social media, but really any kind of marketing. I think small business owners, especially if you're on your own, can struggle with. So we will get to consistency. But tell me, Penny, I've now got my marketing strategy. It's looking really pretty because we're interior designers, so it'll be pretty.
Yeah.
What do we do now?
So I guess the simplest answer of that is, you've got your plan and now you've got to put it into action. So the great thing about having a strategy is that by way of developing a strategy, you might actually identify areas of your website or your email marketing or your social media marketing that aren't actually currently serving the strategy that you've just developed. So that process can often identify areas that need improvement. For example, if one of your business objectives, say as a product-based business, is to increase your website conversions, so your sales, you might look at your website and realize you don't actually have enough calls to action on each page, which basically just means messages that say buy now.
Yeah.
Um, or you might identify that you're neglecting your email list, or you just aren't actually promoting like the benefits of your product enough, or your brand values, or what makes your brand different. So,
Yeah.
um, so yeah, part of it is basically knowing what you want to achieve and figuring out how you achieve that.
And,
Um,
and I suppose that comes back to a lot about when you're setting the strategy,
mm,
knowing what you actually want to achieve from the strategy is the most important part of it. Like
yeah,
working out the channels and the method is kind of secondary. Actually knowing what you want to achieve from this exercise, if you don't know
mm,
where you're going, there's really no point to it.
yeah, absolutely. And like, of course, your strategy um, will, yeah, outline things like where are you showing up on social media, and if how often you might want to post, and how often you might want to add a blog article to your website, or send out an email newsletter, or whatever else,
Yeah.
change your paid ad strategy. Like there's a
Yeah.
million different things that you could be doing. Um, um, but yeah, all of those serve those initial objectives that you've clarified.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we know where we're going. We've got our strategy. Now, last time we talked briefly about how social media is not the top of the chain. It's very much at the bottom of the food chain.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say for someone who is, maybe there's one or two members in the team. They're a relatively new business. They're, it's really kind of at the point where they're still really driving and growing the business, but they
Yeah.
know they need to build their audience. And so they've decided that a newsletter is they're going to be their thing. They're going to build their email list and they're going to put out a newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to deciding how often you put out that newsletter, like I don't know how many, and I am guilty of this as well. I don't know how many times I've signed up to a newsletter and the first three are awesome. And then it's radio silence. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then they'll randomly pop up in like 3 months' time. And it's like, hi, here's our fourth newsletter. And I'm like, oh, hold on,
Yeah.
I've totally forgotten now about 1, 2, and 3. What should people be thinking about when they think about how often are we going to send out this newsletter?
Mm. Yeah. That's such a great question, because I do get that quite often when I have clients come to me. Yeah, and like regardless of if it's an email newsletter, or if it's social media posts or blog articles, or
Mm.
whatever other kind of content you're creating. Yeah, the question is always like, how many times should I be posting? And my most recent answer to this is as many as you can handle.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
and not, sorry, what I mean is not like as many as possible. What I mean is, um, I have seen businesses, small business owners, who have come to me with so much gusto and so much enthusiasm about like taking their digital marketing by storm, and posting like 2 reels a day, email newsletters once a week. And it's just them and me doing that work.
Yeah.
And we have simultaneously burnt out
Yeah.
and realized um how unsustainable that was. And
Yeah. I feel
uh,
like I think of marketing, I think of business in general like this,
mhm,
but I think in particular, I think of marketing like this because it is not my happy place at all. Like
yeah,
it's one of those things where I'm like, if I loved it, I would have become a marketer. I didn't.
yeah,
I became an interior designer. And I can, when it comes to like if I've got 2 tasks that I've got to do, and one is designing a bathroom and one is doing my newsletter for the month, I'm going to choose designing the bathroom every day of the week. But I think the thing that I kind of quite often think about, I think small business in general, it's not just a marathon. Like, it's definitely not a sprint. It's a marathon. But it's not just one marathon. It's like one of those crazy people who run like a marathon every day for a year. Like,
Yeah.
it is a lot of work over a long amount of time. And it's going to be slow. Like, it's going to be really, really slow. And
Yeah.
it's just, you got to keep doing it, kind of thing. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. And I mean, I just think I've seen so many business owners, just as you said, they're like, yes, let's go. We're so excited. But then they just like they fall off a cliff, and it's like, oh.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like, and what's happened is that they have been too ambitious from the outset as to what is actually sustainable for them to produce. So when you're working out how many email newsletters to send and how many social media posts to do, what you need to do is really look at, and this is definitely speaking to people in as sole traders and very small businesses with only sort of 1 or 2 people in their team. Like, be realistic about how much you can do, because it is you will show up better if you know that you are not overextending yourself when it comes to your marketing efforts.
Yeah. And I think as well, like, something we spoke about last episode about how your strategy is not it's not a static document. It's a living, breathing thing. I think as well, the frequency that you put something out, it is also not static. Like, you might go, I'm going to start at 1 newsletter a month, when it's just you and you're still building the business. And if you can do that consistently and you grow, the business grows, the email list grows, kind of thing, you might get to the point where you go, well, I can actually now afford to take on someone who can help me with the newsletter. And I might be able to, with their help, like a few hours, build it up to that I'm now doing it every fortnight, kind of thing. But I'm still putting out the same amount of effort. But I've realized it's going to take me a while to get to that. I couldn't afford it back 12 months ago, but I can now because we've grown the business. And so I think as well, you don't need to kind of go, I said it was going to be every month, and it's going to be once a month forever. You might kind of, and I think, something else that you've mentioned, it's a conversation with your audience. Like, we're not, even big brands, they're in a conversation with their audience, kind of thing. So I think if you can kind of explain to the audience, going, everyone loves the newsletter, we're going to send it out more often, kind of thing. I think that's something that people most probably don't always think about either. It's kind of like,
yeah, absolutely. And that is also something that would inform how often you engage with your audience, because what you're essentially doing when you're sending out an email, or you're putting a blog up, or you're putting a post up on social media, is you're saying, hey, pay attention to me. And I think it is really quite important to think about how often you ask for your audience's attention, and how, I guess, what you're giving them in that post or in that email newsletter. Like, what is your post doing that is so important that your audience should stop and read?
Because that's the other thing that I see people do. They're like, okay, I've got to get a newsletter out every week. And you open it and you're like, why did you bother? Like, like, this is not good. And I think it does more damage to their brand than if they hadn't sent one at all.
Yeah. If you don't have anything to say, then it's not worth, like, asking me to stop my day to listen to you if you actually don't have anything interesting to say.
Yeah. So interesting. Okay, so
So
with consistency, you have to be realistic about what you can achieve, not kind of like not just for the next month, but think
yeah.
about what can you achieve for the next year? Like, can you commit to doing it every week for a year? Or is it, if that just sounds like, I mean, that to me sounds horrifying, but it's like, be realistic about what you can achieve and be realistic so that you don't end up hating it by the end of the year. Like you're going to need to do this a lot. So make sure you don't completely kill yourself trying to achieve it.
Yeah, and also like batch creating content is a great way to go about that as well. And
so that was kind of, I suppose, leads perfectly into my next question. So what are your tips for helping people stay consistent? So we've now got our strategy. We've now worked out how often we can send out our key piece of content. What are kind of some of the ways that we can make that process easier so we can meet that objective?
Yeah. So batch creating content so that you're not doing it on the fly. There's nothing worse than trying to get through all of your work one day and also in the back of your head having that little voice saying, yeah, but you also need to do a post today. You need to do a post today. Remember that Tuesdays are your day is when you post this. So you got to do it. So the benefit of batch creating your content is that you are focusing, just on that task at that time, and you can get a bunch of it done, whether that's weekly or fortnightly or monthly. Like that's up to you and how much content you need to produce and how much sort of time you have to produce it within your week. And also scheduling is a fantastic way. Not to say that you should sort of set and forget, because I think something that's quite important is like coming back to the posts that have just been sent out and responding to your followers and your audience members that are connecting with you through that post.
Yeah.
But being able to mentally say that is sorted, and I don't have to think about that until it's been put up, is so valuable.
Definitely. Because
like,
I
and
think
something that I've
like when it is like, especially if you're thinking about social media, it is social. So you like, especially if you're going, well, I want to improve engagement on my posts, and then you have all these people comment on it, and then you're like, they hear crickets from you, kind of thing. Like you have to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a two-way conversation. So I have definitely recognized, and I've been in this industry for a little over 11 years now. And it's always been a matter of giving as much as you're hoping to receive. And and another thing that I think is really helpful is creating templates for your posts. So if you're someone who posts graphic type content, and this, I guess, is in some ways specifically social media, but of course also email newsletters as well, and this could extend to blog content too. But developing a template for your posts helps not just to cut down the time in creating a post. Like every time you come back to it, you're not just having to reinvent the wheel every single time you're creating a post, but having consistent imagery and consistent graphic design across like all of your different channels is a great way to garner instant brand recognition. So if people know that like your brand is the one that posts the like bright pink
Yeah.
square with like the big cursive writing on it, then they're scrolling through their feed and then going to go, oh, that's that post. That's that brand. I'm going to stop and listen.
Especially when, like, I can't remember what the stat is, but it's horrifying how short our attention spans is now, kind of thing. So, if there is any way you can help your the person who you're trying to talk to, if you can help them by kind of making it really obvious that you're talking to them, like, look at me, that's so important to kind of be on top of.
Yeah, and also I guess not to get like too deep into it, but like if you are delivering the same kind of visual content each time, then what you're allowing your audience to do is go, okay, I don't have to like visually pass what I'm seeing right now because I already understand the format of the post visually.
Yeah.
Now all I need to do is actually consume the content. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And so it's kind of like, this is a person that I know and I trust, and I don't have to do that kind of assessment of, oh, well, who is this? What is this information that I'm getting, like, that is getting put into my brain at the moment?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's so good. The other thing that I find, like, I know, I've heard creative people say, and I can definitely understand this and can vouch for it. Like, I kind of have to be in I have to be in like the right mood to do certain things. Like when it comes to work, when like people go, oh, I couldn't write 3 newsletters in a row because I need to have the creative kind of, the juices need to be flowing kind of thing. Something that I don't do very well at all, and I've kind of tried with different systems and all that kind of stuff, but I suppose it's almost like you might not completely write the newsletter, but you might have a way of storing ideas that you come across. And so it's not like that you're just sitting there at the computer, blank sheet of paper, let's write. It's kind of like you're already building the building blocks of each newsletter or blog post or whatever it is. From ideas that you kind of, seeing over the month or whenever it is that you do that batch kind of thing. And I suppose that's one thing that people can think about is like, how is the best way to capture all of that information? So, I mean, I know there's a million different ways of doing it. And yeah, that's something that I think is really helpful, having a really good way of capturing those thoughts, so that when you do come to batching, you kind of go, okay, I've got this folder and I've got 6 or 7 things that I've seen over the last month, and I can pull 3 or 4 newsletters from that kind of thing. So it's not like you're starting from scratch. You've kind of got that bank of ideas kind of thing there, which obviously, if you have a strategy as well, you can kind of go, okay, well, this month I'm going to be, in my strategy, I was going to be talking about this. And then if I go to my, bank of ideas that I've kind of seen over the last few months, I can kind of pull something from that links in with that kind of thing. So I think you can really see how this kind of, if you've got the strategy and you've got these other systems in place, they really do kind of all start to flow together, and the whole thing should become slightly easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right about having like, even if it's just like a note in your notes app, just a list somewhere that you can add to whenever you might have a conversation with a client, or you might get a comment on your social media post, or there might just be like a topic that just seems to be like serendipitously like coming up a lot in your conversations, that sort of answers that question of what am I going to write about next.
Yeah. And I think as well, like, don't overcomplicate it. Like, there's so many different things. Like, I know lots of people love Notion. I find Notion so complicated. I'm sure if I spent a couple of days I could work it out, but I just cannot get my head around it. But I know there's lots of other things that people use to capture these, and I'm kind of like, I think sometimes it just gets too complicated and you're like, the notes thing in your phone's perfect. It doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. It could be an old-fashioned notebook.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It could be voice notes
Oh, I love a voice note too. Especially because quite often, like I'll be out walking or I'll be somewhere with the kids or something, and I'm like, yeah, 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 yeah. Or the other thing that I really love, which is, so in my car, I can record a voice note in my car and it emails it to me.
Oh, yeah.
And I have used that so much. Like I'm sitting in traffic and I will just like blab away kind of thing. And I do quite find it funny. I will find these old voice notes from the car in my email. And I'm like, what on earth was I rabbiting on about? Like, man, had some free time there. So I just think find what works for you to capture all these thoughts kind of thing. Like don't think, okay, today's batching day, I'm starting from day dot, like just from one kind of thing. So yeah. Oh my goodness, so much good stuff. I think kind of the other thing when it comes to consistency, unlike, well, I suppose now not necessarily consistency, but you've kind of set the strategy and you've now kind of go, okay, we've got this piece of content that we're creating once a month. If you're putting all that effort into creating a great newsletter or a blog post or something, how should people be thinking about, well, what else? Like, it's not just one piece of content, is it? It's where else can I put that message? And the other thing as well is, I suppose, just because you've sent that email, not everyone is going to see the email. So you might think that you're saying the same thing over and over again, but actually your audience might only be seeing it in one of the channels that you're sending it out. So what are a couple of things that people can think of if they've written their newsletter? Like what could be a couple of kind of, I suppose, like templates or things that you could go, okay, well, you could pull a couple of blog posts out of that, or a couple of social media posts and all that kind of stuff. Like, well, how should people be thinking about that?
Great question. So, and something that you've sort of mentioned earlier is this idea that like we don't own our social media audiences. And that's why it is so important to think about the content that we're creating from like a holistic point of view of including blog articles and email newsletters and wherever else you might put it. And what we mean by this idea of not owning your social media audiences is that social media channels can be a little bit of a flash in the pan. I mean, that's sort of a bit of a dramatic way of thinking about it, but we've seen just in the last year how drastically the landscape of social media has changed and how TikTok came in and like disrupted the market, and Instagram's been trying to catch up, and then Elon Musk bought Twitter, and that is its own mess, garbage fire. So what we mean when we say that you don't own your social media audience is that at any given time, you could, people could become disinterested in that app. That app could, for whatever reason, falter. And something that you've experienced, Beth, is having your Instagram account hacked.
Oh, totally. So I mean, and it was so funny. So this all happened at the end of last year. We just started to kind of really start to get momentum on the on Instagram. And overnight it was all gone. And I was like, oh, wow, what are we going to do now? And I think that we've been really fortunate that we've been able to regrow. Like we started a new Instagram account. And it was totally out of our control. We were very fortunate that I knew someone at Facebook who was able to help us get the old account back. but by then
Yeah.
we'd started the new account and it was a bit messy. But I think like I knew I'd heard that message so many times about how you don't own the land, you don't own that like thing, like the algorithm can change, all of that kind of stuff. But you really become laser focused on like talking to your audience through different channels when overnight it's gone. And I think that, I've seen it and it happens more and more often. It's really hard. Like, it's really hard to get them back. Like, you kind of have to know someone who works in the ecosystem of, Meta to get it back. And not everyone knows that.
Yeah.
Like, I feel so fortunate. And it took me ages to work out if I knew anyone. Like, it wasn't like it was obvious. But yeah, like, it's really hard, I think, there's so much part of our life now. It is really hard to kind of go, I can't just focus on that. That can't be my only touch point with my audience.
Yeah. And so then how we look at things is and the reason why we say that like email lists, like, I mean, and your website, like, of course things can happen there as well, but your audience have signed up and opted in to receive emails, and your website, like, I mean, the most unluckiest of people get their website hacked, but like that's not, not a likelihood. So we don't need to really worry about that too much. But
I think as well, though, it's not even just about getting it hacked. Like, I think you think about the Instagram algorithm and it's changed so many times. Like, you kind of go, you cannot keep up with it, kind of thing. And I think this kind of loops all back into what we were talking about, consistency and picking what you can achieve and what you are able to do. And like, the whole reel thing, it's not for me. I don't have time. It's not really my preferred format. I'm not very good at dancing. It doesn't really feel like me. And I'm like, I'm just not going to do it. Like, I'm not going to go down that bandwagon kind of thing. And I remember as well, at one point, I like surveyed my Instagram audience saying, are you guys on TikTok? Is anyone on TikTok? Because everyone was like, you got to be on TikTok. And I'm like, I don't really want to be on TikTok because I cannot do another platform. I'm like, I think this is the other thing about consistency. Pick your platforms. Like, you don't have to be everywhere. But yeah, I think that's the other thing where it's kind of like, it's not just that you could completely lose it, but overnight they can decide they're going to focus on something different, and it might not suit your business and it might not be. So it's kind of like, I mean, it is a great tool, but it's not necessarily, it can't be everything to you.
Yeah. And I think it's so, I mean, this is a whole nother discussion in and of itself, but like, I think it is really important. Like you mentioned, there are people saying like, everyone's on TikTok, you have to be on TikTok. And it's like, you actually don't have to. Like, if it doesn't serve your business and it's not the right platform for you, you don't have to be on TikTok. And if you don't have the energy or the effort or the space to be creating 2 reels a day to put up on Instagram, because all of the like social media dude bros are saying if you're not creating 2 reels a day, then you're losing out on opportunities. Like, maybe, but it's not worth it if that is gonna drive you crazy.
Well, totally. And it comes back to it again. So what, you create 2 reels every day for a month, but then you're so completely burnt out that you don't do anything for 6 months, then there's no, like, you haven't gained anything. You've you're guaranteed you've gone backwards.
Absolutely. So just going back to this idea of like, I guess, streamlining your content or repurposing it. So so we know that our website is something that we own and we have control over, and essentially, like, all roads lead to our website as well. It is the sort of cornerstone of our digital marketing footprint, because it's where people buy your product. It's where people sign up to hear more. It's where people, fill out the form to inquire about and sign on for your services. So that is another way to look at it, and the perfect place for you to house as much of your content as you can, and then use your email newsletter, use your social media, use ads and all of these other areas to draw people back to your website. So if you're thinking about blog, email, newsletter, and social media posts, you could create a hierarchy of the blog being the most important content piece, and then your newsletter and your social media posts, maybe taking snippets or small learnings from that big, long form piece of content, and using those posts as a way to give your audience something to think about, and also getting them to come back to that bigger piece of content.
Yeah, you really want to, I mean, the way I think about it is you really want those they're like little breadcrumbs that you're leading everyone back to your website, because ultimately your website, I think of like your website is like the front door to your house. Like you want people to come into your house and see how beautiful your home is. And so you need to like lay little breadcrumbs to get everyone there, kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was going to steer clear of the house analogy again, but that's absolutely true.
No, we're talking to interior designers. It's a house every day of the week.
I often think like, cleaning up your house is like getting your website in order, because that's where all the good stuff is.
Yeah, definitely. Oh my goodness, Penny, once again, could talk to you forever. Another jam-packed dialogue of lots of really helpful information. And, I was saying to you before, I've just got a list of other conversations we can have, because I just think this is such a important part of our businesses to get right, but it's also can be such an overwhelming part of our business to work on. So remind everyone, how can we get in touch with you?
You can find me on Instagram at twopence.digital, Facebook at /2pence digital, all one word, or via my website, which is www.twopence.digital.
Thank you so much. We will put all of that information in the show notes for everyone. But Penny, thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to our next chat, which we will dive deeper into the world of digital marketing. So thank you, Penny.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this design dialogue. I hope you have found it full of inspiration and helpful information to take into your design studio. If you like the podcast and want to hear more, consider sharing it or writing a review, as it helps us reach more people, and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. If you would like to unlock the power of effortless studio management and elevate your design business to new heights, please follow the links in our show notes to see how more time to design can help you build a better business. Have a great week, and I will see you for our next design dialogue.